Charles Ponzi of the Ponzi scheme. The little Italian Charles Ponzi, he conceded that Columbus and Marconi were greater than him, hit on the fantastic idea of trading in postal coupons. He made so much money that people could not get into his office. Cupboards, drawers, filing cabinets and baskets were crammed full of notes. Some of the great industrial and financial tycoons of America's golden age of money-making in the 19th century struggled for decades to accumulate their fortunes. But the little 20th century Italian Charles Ponzi turned himself into a multi-millionaire in months simply by playing ducks and drakes with a little postal coupon worth 1 cent. Ponzi's scheme was the essence of simplicity. Not for him battling for supremacy in the cutthroat business of railways, mines or steel combines. All he did was buy up tens of thousands of dollars worth of international postal reply coupons costing a cent in Spain, and then cash them in the United States where they were worth 5 cents. But that was not the end of the scheme. Another facet was selling shares in his enterprise, and investors could not get their hands on Ponzi's stock quickly enough. Within 6 months, Ponzi held in the bank and stuffed in various waste paper baskets in his dingy office total cash investments of $15 million. He was so plausible that officials sent to investigate his racket ended by investing in it themselves. At the height of Ponzi's success, an admirer hailed him as the greatest Italian ever. Modestly he brushed off that accolade. There were, he said, 2 fellow countrymen greater than he, Columbus and Marconi. It was a pity in many ways that the man once called the playboy of the Primrose Path should end his days in the charity ward of a Rio de Janeiro hospital. Charles Ponzi was born in Parma, Italy in 1882, the son of a comfortably situated farmer who was able to send his son to university when he had completed his secondary studies. Ponzi did little study, preferring to take a private course in gambling, at which he proved so inept that to save the family name from dishonour, his father paid the huge bills Charles quickly ran up. With his own assets now sadly depleted, Ponzi Sr. gave his 17-year-old son $200 and a one-way ticket to the United States. Determined to increase his capital during the boat trip, Ponzi spent many hours playing poker, so instead of arriving in New York with $200, the youth possessed exactly $2.50. For several years he moved from one job to another and from one state to another, usually by jumping the rattler. In 1906 he illegally crossed into Canada and somehow got a job as a clerk in a Montreal bank. At once his fortune changed, for now he was able to afford the best clothes, wine and women. After serving 3 years for forgery, he crossed the border back into New York, a task so simple that he decided to go into the illegal immigrant business. Ponzi had, for a price, smuggled a number of Canadians across the border before the US federal agents caught up with him and sent him off for another prison spell. Free again in 1917, with America now involved in World War I, Ponzi found it fairly easy, in a depleted labour market, to land a job without too much prying into his past. The job he took at $16 a week was as a clerk with the reputable Boston stockbroking firm of J.R. Poole and Company. His first duty each day was opening the mail, a dull task until the day in 1919 when he opened a letter from Spain containing what was then something of a novelty, an international postal reply coupon. Charles Ponzi had never seen one before, so he made some inquiries. Under the International Postal Agreement, these stamps were bought for a cent in Spain, but at any US post office could be exchanged for cash or stamps to the value of 5 cents. And that, he decided, was how millionaires were made. All he had to do was buy Spanish coupons in bulk, sell them in the United States and make a clear 400% profit. Ponzi borrowed $1,000 at 25% interest, sent it to Spain, got 100,000 1-cent coupons, cashed them in New York for $5,000 and was in business. He used his profits to float the Securities Exchange Company, whose headquarters consisted of a dingy room on the first floor of a building in School Street, Boston. Then he put ads in the papers guaranteeing 50% in 90 days or double your money in 6 months, and the investors, suckers would be more apt, flocked in. On the first day of business, December 20th, 1919, Ponzi took $250. 3 months later, those clients got their 50% and Ponzi pocketed his 350%. With customers throughout the country trumpeting Ponzi's financial genius, police had to be called in to control the huge crowds that jammed School Street waiting to hand over their money. His office bulged with notes of various denominations. The doors of the safes could scarcely be closed. Cupboards, filing cabinets, drawers, waste paper baskets were crammed with the stuff. Even the wooden floor of his office was carpeted with Charles Ponzi's newfound wealth. It was only a matter of time before US Postal Service officials, noticing the huge increase in the Spanish reply coupon business, realized that someone was up to skullduggery. So it was announced that in future no person could cash more than 10 a day. To ward off the inevitable as long as possible, Ponzi began paying the dividends due to old customers with new customers' money. At any rate, in an attempt to put his financial house in order before the storm broke, Ponzi tried to get his scheme going again by manipulating postal coupon conversion between European countries. It was slow going making his first 50,000, so he continued paying old customers dividends by using the 250,000 he was now taking daily from new speculators. To spread his assets, he acquired a bar room, bought a controlling interest in one of Boston's leading banks, and also bought out his old employers, J.R. Poole and Company. The man he now hired as his chief assistant at $1,000 a day was John Donedro, a butcher's rouseabout. Ponzi, now a multi-millionaire, bought a mansion, stuffed it with $40,000 worth of tasteless furniture, and each day rode to work in a handmade car that cost something like $70,000 in present currency. Nor did Ponzi forget to spend fortunes on his favourite hobbies of gambling, liquor and women. Yet the huge cellar under his mansion contained only the cheapest wine, which he preferred to the more delicate vintages. Usually he kept about 100 gallons on hand. Then came the day when a Harvard graduate, Richard Grosier, editor-in-chief of his father's paper, the Boston Post, became suspicious that the so-called financial wizard was robbing Peter to pay Paul. The result was that a team of reporters began delving into Ponzi's background, and it did not take them long to learn that only $8 worth of postal coupons were being redeemed each day. The district attorney was told, and Ponzi was hauled in for interview. The little Italian convinced him that the coupon business was only a blind for his Wall Street activities. So plausible was Ponzi that the district attorney himself invested $25,000 in the Securities Exchange Company. But the Boston police chief was not so gullible, and sent a squad of experts to investigate the Ponzi setup, and these officers also invested their money in the shaky enterprise. Then, in reply to another scathing attack on him by the Boston Post, Ponzi launched a $5 million libel suit against the paper. In 1920, with the libel suit due to be heard in a few days, Richard Grosier's reporters discovered that Ponzi had once been imprisoned in Montreal for forgery. His jail term in the United States was also discovered, and on July 26 the full story was published in the Boston Post. That same day, Charles Ponzi had a record turnover of $2 million. On the next day, a crowd milled outside Ponzi's office screaming, "Kill Ponzi! Kill Ponzi! Lynch him!" Convicted of postal fraud and sentenced to 7 years jail, Ponzi appealed on all sorts of grounds, meanwhile being released on $10,000 bail. He immediately changed his name to Charles Borelli and fled to Florida. On February 15th, 1927, tired of running from the police and broken in spirit, he surrendered and soon after began his third prison term at Charleston State Prison. Freed 7 years later, he was charged with moral depravity and being still unnaturalized, was deported to Italy on October 8, 1934. But the authorities made sure that he did not go on the voyage penniless. They gave him $2.50, the amount he had when he had arrived in the United States. A nephew, Attilio Risso, a colleague of Italy's dictator Benito Mussolini, soon after arranged Ponzi's appointment as business manager for an Italian airline office in Rio de Janeiro. All went well until the Axis was forced out of the commercial flying business in 1942. Then Charles Ponzi lost his job. He tried other ventures, but all failed miserably. The end was near now. Cataracts practically blinded him, and a stroke paralysed the right side of his body. He did not have a cent and became a non-paying patient in a Rio de Janeiro hospital. Interviewed by journalists there, he said, "I'll be out of this and in the money again soon. They can't stop me. I'm the great Ponzi." For a year he lay in his hospital bed, and finally his irresistible spirit evaporated. He said, "I guess the only news about me most people want to hear is my death." Soon after, on January 11th, 1949, his swindling spirit was stilled forever. Actually, he was able to leave a small estate of $75, just enough to pay for his funeral.